Why do you get a fever when you are sick? In 1917, doctors proposed an outlandish treatment for syphilis, the incurable bacterial infection that had ravaged Europe for centuries. Step 1. Infect patients suffering from the later stage of syphilis with the parasite that causes malaria, a deadly but curable mosquito-borne disease. Step 2. Hope that malaria fevers clear the syphilis. And step 3. Minister quinine to curb the malaria. If all went according to plan, the patients would be left alive and free of both diseases. This kills some 15% of patients, but for those survive, it seems to work. It actually became the standard treatment for syphilis until penicillin was widely used decades later, and its driving force was fever. There are many mysteries around fever, but what we know is that all mammals, some birds, and even a few invertebrate and plant species feel fever's heat. It has persisted over 60 million years of evolution, but it has significant costs. For every 1 degree Celsius of temperature increase in human body, there is 20.5% increase in energy required, equivalent to about 20 minutes of jogging for some. So, why and how does your body produce a fever? Your core temperature is maintained via thermoregulation, several processes that usually keep you around 37 degrees Celsius. These mechanisms are controlled by brain hypothalamus, which detects temperature shift and sends signals throughout the body accordingly. If you're too hot, the hypothalamus produces signals that activate your sweat glands or make your blood vessels dilate, moving blood closer to skin surface, all of which release the heat and cools you off. And if you're too cold, your blood vessels will constrict and you may start to shiver, which generates heat. Your body will disrupt its usual temperature equilibrium to induce a fever, which then is about 38 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, it has mechanisms in place to prevent it from exceeding 41 degrees Celsius when organ damage could occur. Immune cells that fighting infection can induce fever by triggering a biochemical cascade that ultimately instructs hypothalamus to increase your base temperature. Your body even gets to work to meet its new set point. Using the mechanism, it would generate heat when cold. Until it reaches its new temperature, you feel comfortably cool, which is why you might experience chills. But why does body do this? While the jury set out how a higher temperature directly affects pathogen, it seems that fever's main effect is in rapidly inducing a whole body immune response. Upon exposure to raised internal temperature, some of your cells release heat shock proteins, or HSPs, a family of molecules produced in conditions. This protein aid lymphocytes, one of the several kinds of white blood cells that fight pathogens to travel more rapidly to infection site. HSP do this by enhancing the thickness of lymphocytes, enabling them to adhere to and squeeze through blood vessel wall so they can reach the area where infection is rising. In the case of viral infections, HSP help them near cells to dampen their protein production, which limit their ability to replicate. This stunts the virus spreads because they depend on their host replicating machinery to reproduce. It also protects the surrounding cells from damage, since some viruses spread by rupturing their host cell, which can lead to large-scale destruction, the buildup of trailers, and potentially even organ damage. The ability of HSP to protect host cell and enhance immune activity can limit the pathogen's path of destruction inside the body. But for all we know about fever's role in immune activation, some clinical trials have the chill fever surprise drug don't worsen symptoms or recovery rate. This is why there is no definite rule or whether to suppress a fever or let it ride. Doctors decide on case-by-case basis the fever duration, intensity, as well as the patient's immune status, comfort level, and age will all play a role in their choice of treatments. If they do let a fever ride, they likely prescribe the rest and plenty of fluid to prevent dehydration, while the body wishes its heat is better. In 1917, doctors proposed an outlandish treatment for syphilis, the incurable bacterial infection that has ravaged Europe for centuries. Step 1. Infect patients suffering from late stage of syphilis with a parasite that causes malaria, that deadly but curable mosquito-borne disease. Step 2. Hope the malaria fever cleared the syphilis. And step 3. Administer quinine to curb the malaria. If all went according to plan, their patient would be left alive and free of both diseases. This killed some 15% of patients, but for those who survived, it seems to work. It actually became the standard treatment for syphilis until penicillin was widely used decades later. And its driving force was fever. There are many mysteries around fever, but what we did know is all mammals, some birds, and even a few invertebrate and plant species feel fever's heat. It has persisted for over 6 million year evolution, but it has significant cost. For every 1 degree Celsius of temperature increase in a human body, there is a 20.5% increase in energy required, equivalent to about 20 minutes of jogging for some. So, why and how does your body produce a fever? Your core temperature is maintained via thermoregulation, a set of processes that usually keep you around 37 degrees Celsius. These mechanisms are controlled by breathing hypothalamus, which detects minute temperature shift and sends signals throughout the body accordingly. If you're too hot, the hypothalamus produces signals that activate your sweat gland, or make your blood vessels dilate, moving blood closer to the skin surface, all of which release heat and cools you off. And if you're too cold, your blood vessels will constrict and you may start to shiver, which generates heat. Your body will disrupt its usual temperature equilibrium to induce a fever, which is set in about 38 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, it has mechanisms in place to prevent its exceeding 41 degrees Celsius when organ damage could occur. Immune cells that are fighting infection can induce a fever by triggering a biochemical cascade that ultimately instructs your hypothalamus to increase your baseline temperature. Your body then gets to work to meet its new set point, using the mechanisms it would to generate heat when cold. Under which when you need temperature, you feel comparably cool, which is why you might experience chills. But why does why do this? While the jury is still out of how higher temperatures directly affects pathogens, it seems that fever's main effect is in rapidly inducing a whole body immune response. Upon exposure to raised internal temperatures, some of your cells release heat-shock proteins, or HSPs, a family of molecules produced in response to stressful conditions. This protein aid lymphocytes, one of the several kinds of white blood cells that fight pathogens, to travel more rapidly to infection site. HSP do this by enhancing the thickness of lymphocytes, enabling them to heal and squeeze through blood vessels wall so they can reach the area where infection is rising. In a case of viral infection, HSP help tell nearby cells to dampen their protein production, which limit their ability to replicate. This stunts the virus's spread because they depend on the host replicate machinery to reproduce. It also protects the surrounding cells from damage, since some viruses spread by rupturing their host cell, which can lead to large-scale destruction, the ability of detroit, and potentially even organ damage. The ability of HSP to protect host cell and enhanced immune activity can limit the pathogen's path of destruction inside of the body. But for all we know about fever's role in immune activation, some clinical trials have shown that fever suppressor drugs don't worsen symptoms or recovery rate. This is why there's no definite rule on whether to suppress a fever or let it ride. Doctors design on case-by-case basis the fever's duration and intensity, as well as their patient's immune status, comfort level, and age will all play a role in their choice of treatments. If they do let a fever ride, they likely prescribe rest and plenty of fluids to prevent dehydration, while the body which is heated better.